Welcome to the Painting Coach, and today I'm going to show you how to paint the Indiana Jones of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. It is Vulkan He'stan, that's right, Vulkan lives. A huge thank you to Games Workshop for sending me this model out early so I can create this content. So that any ado, let's get painting. So the first thing that I have done is prime the miniature with Mechanicus Standard Grey. Now the reason I've done this is because there's lots of different colours than just the standard green of the Salamander armour. Now if you wanted to use something like Colour Forged Salamander Green, that's absolutely fine. But I went with the grey because I know that I'm going to be painting quite a few lighter colours on this as well. And I wanted to make sure I could get that easy coverage with some of the paints. That said, the first thing I'm going to do is base the green armour, and the colour I'm using for this is Warp Lightning. Now, this isn't a fantastic paint when it comes to coverage, as you can see as I'm putting it on. So you're going to have to take your time with this. You are going to have to do 2 or 3 thin coats of it. Now, an alternative way you could do this is to mix a 50-50 mix with some Caliban green as well. But I've just gone straight in with the Warp Lightning. So work your way across all the green armour panels. Check the box art if you're not sure which bit is which. So we're going to make a start with those light areas, and we're looking at the inside of the cloak here, as well as the kind of fleshy part of that salamander cloak that he's wearing. So what I'm going to do is take some Rakarth Flesh and base all of this. Now, be careful around bits that you've already finished, like on the armor. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you do get some on there, but we're in the fairly early stages. So we're going to do inside of the cloak, and we're going to do those bits of fleshy parts which are coming over the shoulders and also under the backpack as well. And don't forget, there's also some purity seals that we're going to do. Once that's completely dry, I'm going to shade it down. Now, pure Agrax Earthshade is probably going to be too dark for this and too messy to clear up because of how the model goes together. So what I've done is mixed a 50-50 mix of Rakarth Flesh and Agrax Earthshade. And I'm going to paint this over all of the Rakarth Flesh base that we put down in the previous step. So this is a very thin paint. It's not quite a wash, it's not quite a base, but what it will do is darken down in all of the recesses. So paint this over the entirety of the areas that you've already painted with Rakarth Flesh. Once that's completely dry, we can go back in with the Rakarth Flesh and start to layer up across those higher folds and higher creases and any area really that we think is going to catch some light. Now, because we've used the mix in the previous stage, there's not going to be as harsh a transition in this, which will just give you a really nice light base to work from and build up from, rather than having to try and fight where you've got real darkness and real brightness. To finish up, we'll take a 50-50 mix of Rakarth Flesh and Pallid Wych Flesh. And what we're looking to do here is get this inside the Rakarth Flesh from the previous stage. And we're also looking to make sure that we don't put it on too thickly. This should be a fairly thin highlight. We're going to look to catch all the sharpest folds and creases that we've got across these areas. For the inside of the cloak itself, it's probably a little bit easier to just stipple it on those raised areas, as that'll give you a better highlight. Next up, we'll base the back of that salamander cloak and obviously the loincloth that Vulkan He'stan has. And probably against my own better judgment, I'm going with Gal-Vorbak Red. Now, as you can see, Gal-Vorbak Red isn't the best paint in the world. It doesn't flow particularly well. It doesn't cover particularly well. It's not the nicest paint to use. So just persevere though, because the colour is absolutely perfect for what we need it to. So just work your way. We're going to paint this on the back of the cloak, and we're also going to paint it, like I said, on that loincloth. When that's dry, we're going to take some Nuln Oil and shade all across these areas. Now, I'm not putting on too much Nuln Oil here. It's very easy to flood these areas and it'll start to run down the bottom and really pool in quite a nasty look. So I'm just making sure it goes into all the recesses and painting it towards the bottom a little bit, just so I get a nice shade. When that's completely dry, I'm going to go back in with the Gal-Vorbak Red. Now, because this doesn't cover particularly well, it's great for that first highlight stage. So what I'm looking to do is just drag my brush across those scales, painting across any really angular parts where I want to get a really nice pronounced highlight. And also on the fleshy parts which haven't got any scaling on them, I can get some nice early highlights on here as well, because as it dries, it blends down the layer underneath. The first proper highlight I'm going to do is with Khorne Red. And what I'm looking to do here is really start to pick out some of those scales that we've got across the back. So I'm looking to drag the brush across the sharp edges, making sure that I'm not putting this on too thickly, because I want to keep all the colours that we've got underneath. That's what's really helped build up the texture on this. So just work your way across. And again, we're really only focusing on the parts of the model facing upwards. We don't need to worry about highlighting things that are facing downwards, because they're not going to catch any light. For the final highlight, I'm going to take a 50-50 mix of Khorne Red and Screaming Skull. Now, this is going to give you a little bit of a pink colour. You could potentially use Pink Horror for this, but this is a little bit more vibrant. And what I'm looking to do here is really get it inside the Khorne Red from the previous stage, making sure it's nice and thin, and it is definitely only on the top edge of some of these scales. So this is going to give me, again, a nice popping highlight that really adds to some of the texture that we've built up across this cloak with all the different layers. Next, I'm going to block in all of the black elements on the model. Now, there's a few large areas, a few small areas. So we've got the Salamander buckle, we've got the cover for the Flamer Fist, we've got the backpack, and some cabling and little bits and pieces across the model. If you're not 100% sure, check the box art. I'm using AK Black for this. If you haven't got that, it's absolutely fine. You can use a Baden Black. I'm also going to paint Vulkan's head because I've gone for the helmetless option. The first highlight is going to be on the head or the face only, and that's going to be with Corvus Black, which is a very, very, very dark black. And what I'm looking to do here is start to pick out some of Vulkan's features. So I'm going to drag my brush where I can, but generally we're looking at the nose, the brow, all that scarring across his head, the cheekbones, and just carefully working our way into the face as well. So we've got the lip and also those cheekbones. The next highlight, which will be for the face as well as all of the black elements, is going to be with Eshin Grey. Now, this is a nice highlight because it does blend down quite nicely into the colour underneath it. So what I'm looking to do here is where I can is drag my brush to get a nice crisp highlight. So across the backpack, across the weapon holster, that's nice and easy. Across that cover that we've got on the flamer, it's a little more difficult to do that. So what we're looking to do here is just put this inside where that trim is going to go. So we've got a little bit of a highlight, working our way up towards that salamander head because that's where it's going to be brightest. The last highlight we'll do is with Dawnstone. So for this, we'll start off with the face. What we're looking to do is get this inside the Eshin Grey from the previous stage. So generally, we're going to try and drag our brush along this as much as possible. Now, I've got very little paint on my brush, and I've got a really good point. And what that's going to do is going to enable you to pick up all of the detail I need to, so you get a nice highlight. When it comes to the rest of the model, we're going to do exactly the same. We're going to drag our brush across those areas where we can to get the nice crisp highlight. And where we can't, we're just going to very carefully paint it inside the Eshin Grey from the previous step. We'll start all the gold trim next, and the colouring used for this is Retributor Armour. If you've got Dragon's Gold from Two Thin Coats, which is what I normally use, then that's absolutely fine. Now, there is quite a lot of gold trim across the model. We are going to go back in and fix some of the warp lightning, the green, before we actually finish the armor. That doesn't mean we can be reckless with the gold now because it'll take us a lot longer to fix later. So just take your time with this and make sure you get it exactly where you want it. There's a lot of armor trim. There's the trim around the buckle. There's the flamer head. There's plenty of gold on the model. If you're not 100% sure, check the box art. Just take your time with this and be careful, especially with some of the flames that are sculpted on the model. Next, take some Reikland Fleshshade and paint this over all of the gold, focusing particularly around rivets and in the recesses. This is another opportunity to be careful in how you apply this. Like I said, we will go and correct the green, but we don't want to spill this into the green areas because that's just going to make it much more difficult to clean up later on. When that's completely dry, we'll start to highlight the gold. Now, the colouring used for this is Glistening Gold from Two Thin Coats. If you haven't got this, then Liberator Gold from Citadel is absolutely fine. What I'm looking to do generally is drag the brush across the shape of the model to catch those nice sharp edges. And we're focusing on the bits that are going to face upwards, that are going to catch the light and have all that reflection. Now, we do also want to highlight all of the flames that we've got on the armour as well, but just take your time with this. All we want to do is basically just drag our brush across them. We're not going to put too much paint on our brush. We're not going to go crazy. We just want to make sure we've got some nice, tidy highlights. The final highlight, which is optional, is with white gold from Pro Acryl. And what I'm looking to do here is just some dot highlights, some dragged highlights where we think there's going to be quite a bit of reflection. And this is just going to give you a little bit of an extra bright gold. And that's really going to help the model pop and really help you kind of read it on the tabletop. Next up, we'll paint the silver, and I'm going to use dark aluminium from Vallejo Metal Colour. If you haven't got this and you've got lead belcher, that's absolutely fine. Just be careful because we're starting to get into those realms of parts we've already finished. So you just need to take your time and be a little bit patient. There's some bits on the spear. There's obviously the halo, the exhaust on the backpack, and any other little bits of silver across the model. But like I said, there's not a huge amount. We'll then use some Nuln Oil to shade all of this. Again, we're not slopping this on. We're not putting it on so we've got massive dark pools across the miniature. We just want to put a little bit on there and make sure it runs into all the recesses so we get a nice shade. To highlight the silver, we'll take some chrome from Vallejo Model Air, and generally we're just going to drag our brush. It'll give us a nice crisp highlight. There's lots of nice angular pieces here where we can do this. And this should be a fairly easy, straightforward, and actually quite a quick step. Now, if you haven't already, go back in with some Warpstone Glow and fix any mistakes you've made across the green armour. Once you've done that, take some Nuln Oil and paint this into all the recesses. Now, this is the kind of step where if you like to use oil paints or panel liner, you can do that. But I want this to dry quite quick, so I'm going to use some Nuln Oil. Now, I've got a good brush for this with a really good fine tip, so it means I can be very deliberate about where I put this. I'm not washing the entirety of the mini, I'm just painting it in the recesses, and that means it's going to be a little bit easier to clean up going forward. The first highlight is going to be a 50-50 mix of Moot Green and Warpstone Glow. Now, this is a nice brighter green. You can definitely see it's a step up from just the Warpstone Glow on its own. So what we'll have to do is generally do some edge highlights across the armour. Where we've got that, we'll just drag the brush. If you check the box art, then that right leg of Vulkan seems to have a little bit more of a volumetric highlight. So we've got the top of the knee, which is much brighter, and the top of the thigh pit, which is much brighter as well. So I'm just going to stipple into this area and just see how that comes up. As it dries, it should blend in. If you've got a little bit of a harsh line, then just take a little bit of Warpstone Glow and just feather the edge of it, and you'll get a nice smooth transition. But generally work your way across all of the green parts of the armour, popping this highlight in. And like I said, it'll generally be a line highlight across everything. The final highlight on the green is going to be pure Moot Green. Now you can see, again, this is brighter still from the 50-50 mix we used previously. It's extremely bright. I do actually quite like this green. So what we're looking to do here is paint this inside the mix from the previous step. Where we can, we'll drag our brush across the model to make sure we do get a nice crisp highlight. On that knee and thigh pad, again, I'm just going to stipple it in the middle to get that nice bright effect. It's nice and easy, nice and straightforward. Work your way across the model, taking your time. If you do make any mistakes, you can always use a little bit of the mix that you should still have on your palette just to help you ease that harshness. We'll get everything ready for flames next, so we're going to paint quite a bit of white across the model. Now, the colour I'm using for this is Corax White, which I know a lot of people don't use, but I actually do quite enjoy using. It did take me 2 coats of this, even though I'm painting across mainly grey elements, because I did thin it down a little bit more. But essentially, we're looking to paint anything that's going to be on fire. So we've got, obviously, the flaming brazier, or it's not really a brazier, is it? Halo across the top. We've got the flames around the base. We've also got Vulkan's spearhead. And there are some white elements on the armour. So we've got the Salamander on the buckle and the Salamander on the Flamer Guard. Once we've got a nice even coverage, I'm then going to take AK White, which is a much brighter white, a bit more of a pure white than the kind of off-white that Corax White is. And generally, I'm going to paint this across these areas as well, leaving some of that Corax White in the recesses. And this just really helps get a nice bright base for doing all of the fire. We're going to use contrast paint for that. We're going to get some nice bright effects. Before we do all that, I just want to get the Salamander on the belt buckle and the Flamer Guard done first. Apologies, it is a little bit washed out here. I'm just going to take some Soulblight Grey and paint this all over the white elements. Make sure you give this a good shake. Okay, now you can see I've already done some of the flames on the base. I'm going to show you how to do those. We're going to work very quickly. We're going to use 2 colours. We're going to use Imperial Fist and Magmadroth Flame contrast paint. So I've got both pots open at the same time. You might want to watch this first before you try and follow. Then I'm going to take the Imperial Fist and paint this all over the area that I want to be brightest. Now, flames are brightest where they're hottest. So I'm going to paint the majority of the bottom part of the flame on the brazier with the Imperial Fist contrast paint. Once I'm happy with the coverage, I'm going to clean my brush off and I'm going to pop that in the Magmadroth Flame and paint the rest of the fire. So I'll very much have a 2-tone flame at this point where it's kind of yellow and it stops and then goes into orange. What I'm going to do is clean my brush off again. I'm going to dip it back into the Imperial Fist contrast paint and I'm going to start to brush this over the transition between the 2 colours. So it's important we're working quite quick here because we don't want those colours to start to dry. Otherwise we'll get tearing and watermarks. It'll be very ugly. But just work your way and work that paint into it and you'll start to see that it blends into itself, and without too much effort and too much time, it's starting to look like a really nice flame. For the spear, we're going to do exactly the same, where we'll paint the bottom part of it with the Imperial Fist, and then we'll go in with the Magmadroth Flame. Now, I didn't work quite quickly enough with this, so it did start to dry, which means it wasn't perfect. It doesn't matter so much for the spear, because we can do a lot of work on it after, just to tidy it up. But you get the idea. Pop the Imperial Fist down, and then whilst it's wet blend in some orange, and you'll get that nice flame effect. To add a little bit of red in, I'm just going to take a tiny, tiny bit of Baal Red and paint this towards the end of the spear and also towards the end of any flames, which again is just going to help give us that little bit extra in terms of the colour transition. For the Salamander head on that flaming halo that we've got, I've just taken some Magmadroth Flame and painted this across the black, and that's going to give you a really easy fake glow effect as well. To really enhance the flames and make them brighter at source, take some Dawn Yellow and just paint this into some of the recesses and across the most prominent parts of the flame. This is really going to give you a nice effect that, again, just helps add the brightness, and it keeps the vividness. It doesn't wash the flame out. It doesn't kind of desaturate in any way. It just makes it look nice and bright. When it comes to the spear, we're going to use this across the power nodes. We can do a little bit of edge highlighting with it as well. And probably we're going to paint the majority of the bottom of the spear this color as well, just to give it that real nice, bright, on fire look. We'll then take some AK White and highlight the Salamander on the belt buckle and also on the flamer guard. And if you haven't already, use this to paint the lens and Vulkan's eye. Now the spear looks like it's got a little bit of ash, or that it's burning something away on the front of it. So what I'm going to do is take a little bit of AK Black here. And I'm just going to stipple this in the kind of shape that we've got. It's kind of a V shape, so just follow along the shape of the spear. If you're not 100% sure what it looks like, check the box art. But generally, I've got a very good tip on my brush, not much paint, and the paint is quite thin, so it flows nicely. And we're stippling, so we're just dabbing, and we're focusing it really where we've got the darker colour. Take your time with this. We don't want to make any mistakes here, because we'll have to repaint the whole of the spear blade if we do. So I wasn't 100% happy with how this looked. I thought it was too dark, so I just want to give it a little bit of a highlight with some Khorne Red, just to bring some of that red warmth in and tie it into the rest of the spear. To paint Vulkan's lens and his eye, I just took a little bit of Baal Red and dropped this over the lens and dropped it into the eye socket as well. I wasn't sure if the whole eye socket was red, but looking at the box art, it seems to be, so that's why I've done it. Once that was completely dry, I mixed some AK White in with the Baal Red and just dotted the centre of that lens. And there we have it. Vulkan He'stan is done, ready for the tabletop and ready to hunt down those lost relics of Vulkan. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like down in the comments. I'll pop another link to some different salamanders I've done here, just to show you a slightly different way of painting it. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.